Junkie Nation, look who we have. One of our favorites. It's Mercedes Terrell, the current host of the Magic Hour, along with her partner Jade Bryce, and former Bellator ring girl. Saddens me to say that, but she's all done over there, and it's great to see you, Mercedes. How you been?
I have been really good. Thank you for having me on.
All right. Well, listen, like I said, when I read the news that it was your last show, I think a little tear did come down my eye because we got to know you for the last decade, and you were a pillar with Bellator. You were there for a long time, So whatever may be next for you, if you're going to share that with us or not, great. But let me tell you something. You did a great job with Bellator, and so we're happy with you. We're happy for you either way. But a tear did come down my cheek. Gotta admit.
Me too. I feel like I did all my ugly crying on the last night of the last show I was with them for. So yeah, I did not expect it to be such an emotional departure, but it was. Everyone broke all the COVID rules in the Bellator bubble and gave me a hug, even though we weren't supposed to, it was supposed to be social distancing and such. So it was hard to say goodbye to that family I've had for, over a decade.
Did this sneak up, or did you already know, like, either days, weeks, months in advance that you were kind of circling a certain day or a month of the calendar to wrap it up with Bellator?
Well, I'd originally talked to the producer in December of last year and basically we discussed like what was next for me. What did I want to do going forward? Did I want to still be a ring girl? Was there another position in Bellator that made sense? And at that point, I said, I'd like this to be my last season as a ring girl. And then I had a bunch of ideas of what that would look like moving forward. I put together a whole program for them. And then COVID hit and changed a lot of things. So when that happened, it was really, I'm sure interesting for everybody. But there was a big rework of what was going to happen for Bellator generally, because, of course, the show was not going to be able to go on as it had normally. We had to have, we had 5 months off. We had no fans in the seats when we came back. You guys know the whole deal. And for me, it was really taking that 5 months to do a deep dive inward. I really feel like I took instruction from COVID or coronavirus to go inward, essentially, or, go on lockdown. And then I hired a therapist that I saw weekly for all of lockdown. I'm still seeing her weekly. I also dream journaled, which is something I'm really passionate about. So I dream journaled, which is like a Jungian psychology thing, for 5 months straight every single morning. So I just did a serious introspective deep dive that when I came out of, at the end of that, when Bellator came back online and started our shows in Connecticut, I was kind of in a totally different mind space than when COVID had started. So I was just ready at that point. My season was ending in September. So I knew that was going to be probably my last show would be in there. And so it was, and here we are.
Okay, so this sounds like it's, let me see, something within your personal being that you just decided, I don't want to be a ring girl, but I think you're probably moving away from the sport altogether, or sports, or like what pulled you away, I guess, is my question.
No, not at all pulling away from the sport specifically. I mean, I love this sport. I've been with Bellator for almost 12 years. And it was really just this journey of watching this company go from nothing to something amazing, being a part of the growth of the sport itself, of MMA. So no, I mean, I don't think I'll ever be sick of watching fights or be done with the sport specifically. Have all the love in the world for Bellator. The company was incredible to work with. And I'm sure I'll still have a relationship with them in some capacity or another going forward. And who knows what the future holds there. But for me, it was really this clarity, I guess you could say, of the transition that I was really just getting myself ready for, which was moving from the limitations that being a ring girl held for me into the bigger space that felt right for me, which was exploring deeper on, the podcast, the Magic Hour that I have with Jade, and getting spending more of my time and attention on that, and then really expanding the type of content and amount of content I could create for the directions that I'm passionate about. Really, it's about awakening modern man. It's about helping people towards their own introspection, which is funny because it's basically just holding up a mirror for the world to look into. So trying to figure out how I could do all of that and juggle a Bellator schedule, it didn't make sense anymore for me. And then I also started an OnlyFans, which in the first week of starting that thing, which was at the very end of COVID, right as Bellator was picking back up, and right as it's not the end of COVID, I guess it's still not the end of COVID, but you know what I mean? Right when we started as a company, Bellator started having shows again, the OnlyFans started, and that took off in such a impactful way for my life. It was pretty obvious what I needed to do. So.
All right. So I know you're a hit on Instagram, your social media. I know your Facebook's over, in the 7 figures and everything like that. Man, I apologize. I've heard of OnlyFans, but can you tell me real quick what is that? I never dove into that one, or Snapchat or TikTok, and like maybe I'm just out or what. But what's this OnlyFans deal?
Yeah, OnlyFans it has a bad rap right now, I feel like, or I don't even know it's a bad rap. It just definitely has a reputation. I think it was originally built as a platform to, anybody, but celebrities in particular could go on there and could create a platform where people could come basically pay money to have some sort of direct contact with them, whether it be DM or seeing posts that were exclusive, that type of thing. And then when the coronavirus lockdown happened, all the strip clubs closed, all the places that people would normally facilitate, seeing some sort of entertainment in that regard, closed down. So then I guess all the girls went on there, and all their patrons went on OnlyFans as a place to be able to connect with them still. So that's where the reputation certainly comes from, I think, for OnlyFans, being a place where you see extremely explicit and sexy content. Of course, my own career has very sexy at the forefront, and so you will be able to see sexy content of me, and maybe sexier than I've done before. But also I'm putting all of, you guys know by now because you've been with me for a long time, but all the weird stuff that I get into, all the different skits I'm making, and now I'm creating even more highly produced content, along with very casual and behind the scenes content, stuff that you just haven't seen me do before. And it's giving me, like, I never even thought about asking for payment for the content I was creating before, which is maybe strange for people to hear, but I'd always worked on a contract basis with a company that, paid me to show up to a job in a more promotional sense like that, or a brand ambassador sense. But this opportunity with OnlyFans is like allowed me to create the content that I think is speaking most deeply to my following and is actually having a really healing effect. I get comments and feedback from them that is about how their life has changed since interacting with me in that level. So that's the opportunity that's really offered me. Again, you're going to go over to OnlyFans, you're going to see the sexy stuff. You're going to see, my sexy side and all of that, which is I think an important facet of everybody. We're all sexual beings. That's an important thing. I've always used that as one of my gifts and tools in life and in business. But there's also all these other pieces of the spectrum over there that I'm really getting to put a lot more focus on. I'm excited about it.
All right. Well, congratulations. I had seen it a lot on Twitter. I know Adam Hunter from MMA Roasted is always teasing some of the female fighters, saying something about OnlyFans. So I had an idea that it could be like racy pics or something like that. And then I also remember, because again, Mercedes, we've been covering you for over a decade. I remember a long time ago you clarifying you wouldn't do Playboy. So I knew that probably something like that also couldn't be nudes. It's just, I guess, Instagram on steroids, maybe, kind of like that.
Yeah, I would say this. I'd say that who I was when we probably had that discussion is, I feel like, something I really deeply addressed over these last, I don't know what it's been, 5 to 7 months or so, healing like a shame wound that I had around my own sexuality, and around how I was projecting that onto others, onto the world and such. And that's given me a lot more freedom. Like I feel a lot more free in my body, and people are going to take that however they're going to take that. But I think I'm doing a really good job of balancing out, whatever it was that was originally keeping me from being fully, I don't know, this sounds so woo-woo, but being fully in my authentic self. Like I really feel like I don't have any limitations anymore. It's also interesting not being with a brand, like not being with Bellator anymore, where I'm not considering or not having to consider my specific relationship being part of the persona I put out into the world. So that limitation is also gone. I didn't even expect this when leaving them, because it would been such a part of me for so long. It's part of me, I don't even see the boundaries there. But once I was done with Bellator, moved, out of that sphere and didn't have them on my schedule anymore, it was like, oh, like I'm free. I'm literally planning my own life going forward. And that might seem silly, but it really was a different, just a different thing for me.
We booked this interview about 3 weeks ago, and so I thought maybe this hinged on some sort of an announcement. Like, do you have another announcement, like another career, or did you just need time to decompress before you started, telling people what you're telling us today?
It's not that I have another career at all. I mean, it's that this sector that I'm focusing on is going to be the way that I interact with the world that makes me feel of service, if that makes sense. So it's not about something brand new starting. It's about me finally being able to put the attention where it's deserved and growing this thing into what I think it can be. I'm asking people, I feel like I'm very much, I might be speaking in vagaries, and I think it's really hard for people to understand how, first of all, I came out of Bellator and just made that decision. I feel like people are like, what were you, did you get pregnant? Did you I don't know what they think, sleep with a fighter? Did something happen where you got, fired? What actually happened there? And then once I say, no, actually, this was a conscious decision. This is how I made it, whatever. Then the other question, like you're saying, George, is, well, what is it? What's next? And for me, what's next is really growing into something I've started that I didn't even realize maybe I was starting, but it is something I've been kind of training for, so to speak, my whole life, which is, and that's why I say I feel like I'm really pioneering this sector, because it's about asking people to hold a contradiction, which is me, which is, I think, all humans, but we haven't all realized it yet. My contradiction is I'm a, sexy model on the forefront, but I also am a deep diving, spiritual healer and person who wants to dive deeply into introspection and psychology and topics that I think it's hard for people to hold those two contradicting things in the same moment. So that's what I'm asking the world to do. I'm literally living it, so I know it's possible. And I see people that are coming on board and taking the journey with me and actually accepting it instead of resisting it. So yes and no. I mean, yes, I am starting a new thing. It's pioneering a contradiction by living it and being it, and hopefully by also setting example to the world through my own experience. And then I'm hoping that people will understand that is a huge pivot from where I was.
Definitely. And this will be my last question relating to the Bellator job, because I want to be respectful of everything you're saying. It's very, very interesting, very fascinating, actually. All right. So just to go back, and it seems like you left on good terms. There was hugs going all around. You broke the COVID rules. But when now on CBS Sports with that major platform, in 6 months to a year, could they bring you back in another role? Would you be open to that? I guess that's what I meant about, have you shut it down completely with that company or just MMA? That's what it kind of meant.
Yeah, so I definitely, no bridge was burned on either side. So definitely open to that discussion. I will say that I feel like right now my I am working at full capacity. I don't feel like I have any more bandwidth available at the moment. And I'm known for saying yes when I should say no. So right now it doesn't feel possible because at the pace and the trajectory I'm going on, I don't think that fits. But I do think that I'm always open to any kind of conversation like that. I love the company. I love the people there. They are literal family members. So I would never say never to that, but I will say that the direction and pace and where I'm going right now, it just might not fit.
Mercedes, when we talk about, sometimes in these types of situations, we talk about a certain closure that happens, and it doesn't always really happen right away. The fact that there weren't any fans there, is that something that would have made it a little bit more difficult? Like, I'm trying to think of your emotions at the end of the night, but not hearing that roar of the crowd and all that, is that something that kind of left a little bit of a void at the end?
That's a super good question. I think nothing could have made it more emotional because I was already so emotional. I even surprised myself with it. I think having the fans there is definitely something that, I don't know if you guys have been to any fights since all this has gone down where it's just empty, but there is a different energy around the cage, which is really tough. I think when you tour with a fight like I have for so many years, and when you've been, I want to call it like in a circus family for so many years, right? Because we just tour like a traveling circus, and you've had that section of the event nights where it's all about the fans. It's about, creating an atmosphere and all that. And then all of a sudden that just gets shut off. It definitely leaves one wanting when you're cage side. But I think my job specifically, or I've always thought this way, my job specifically is to be the cheerleader, so to speak, or the person who's in there trying to be supportive to the fighters, especially, but to the whole staff and crew, because this is a event that's supposed to be entertainment, and it's not just entertainment for us who's sitting around the cage, but also for those watching on TV, or on the YouTube channel or wherever. And also, just as a memory that pops up where it feels really aligned, is the very beginnings of Bellator, when I was cage side at fights with almost no audience, because we didn't have the attendance that we have, or had before COVID started. We had very little audience there, but sometimes it was mostly staff and a few people who'd trickle through, and we're having a fight in the middle of like a strip mall or some weird place that we decided to have our events in the beginning. So it feels a little nostalgic in a weird way to be near a cage with such a empty seating arrangement around me. It's been really interesting, but it does leave one wanting.
In listening to your podcast, I've heard this from a lot of people, but I actually went through it as well, is just, we don't get to really hear from you very much. And what the podcast did was it introduced us to another side of you. And so it's very easy to label people that you see on TV, and then you hear them speak and talk about things, and you go, oh, I didn't know she'd like this, or I had that all wrong. For yourself, in Bellator, going through all that, was there ever anybody that you had kind of like the reverse for, like a fighter or an analyst or someone where you went, man, this whole time I thought this person was like this, but the more I got to know them, I really got that label wrong. This person's really surprised me or done something like that? Because that's kind of happened a lot in listening to your podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's tough because I started really the beginning of Bellator, so I didn't have a lot of experience with the personalities that were coming on the scene prior to meeting them right away. I met them the first time I ever heard them, in other words. So in the beginning and through most of my career with Bellator, I'd say that the people, even personalities, even fighters, because we started with fighters from the ground up, a lot of the time, I met them and learned who they were from the ground up. But maybe some big names when we got bigger, as Bellator got bigger, Viacom, we got bought by Viacom and all these changes happened. The fighter names got bigger, obviously. And some of the fighters that came on board, like a Chael Sonnen or Matt Mitrione, or, these names that would come on board where you're like, these personalities are ridiculous. Tito Ortiz, the villains and the personas that they portray that are all about, making the fans love or hate them. When you meet them and you go on a long bus ride with them or whatever, you get to talking, get to know these people. They are a lot of the time almost the exact opposite of the persona they put on, because the persona they put on is the almost alter ego that they need to turn on for not just popularity reasons, but for them to be able to do the work of stepping in the cage and becoming this fierce, full spectrum human that makes us all look at these guys like, holy shit, these are literal superhumans. It's because they have much of what we talk about on the show, or much about what I'm talking about when I talk about awakening the modern man. They have really, in a lot of ways, stepped into their full, what I like to call remembered self, where they've taken all the members of their psyche, all the members of their person, and they've aligned them in a way that allows a bigger story to be told to the public. And it makes us all go, wow, like this guy's a really talented individual. But when you get to know them, the persona that they wear, on their sleeve in person in an more intimate setting is definitely not necessarily what you see on TV. So it's really cool to see that. And even what came to mind also was Goldie, like someone who we've seen for so long with the UFC and then came over to Bellator. Of course, I'm sure he had his own growing pains there with Bellator, but everyone had an idea that he was going to be this diva, and I'm sure to many degrees he's a diva. I don't know. I don't have to work with him on the production level specifically, but what I know him as is this really kind individual who, even though he hasn't had a lot of time with me per se, made a point to come look me eye to eye and say, speak beauty into me and say the ways that he really was proud to have worked with me. So just someone who makes other people feel seen and heard. Might not be who you think that guy is off the bat. I don't know. And then just individuals who just are surprised, like Big John, for instance. He's this big bear of a man, but is like the most kind person you might ever come across. And if you're in the industry, you know that no one probably has a bad thing to say about the guy.
I have one serious question and one silly question, but I'm going to let you choose which one goes your way. What do you want? So you're not going to give me both of them, though? I can if you want. Want to do that?
Yeah.
All right.
I told you I got time, y'all.
Silly question.
Okay.
Will you ever enter Thackerville ever again?
Never again.
There's nothing that we don't know about. Like, they have an amusement park that we don't know. There's no reason to ever go to Thackerville.
Weird fact. You guys have watched, I'm sure by now, maybe you haven't, I don't know. What's called Tiger King?
Mm-hmm.
The sensation Tiger King. Did you know that is right outside of Thackerville?
Really?
So, if I ever wanted to visit the Tiger King Park, I might find myself back in Thackerville. But otherwise, I will probably avoid. By the way, sending so much love to the people in Thackerville and the people who I worked with for so many years at the venue there, all the way around. But it's no, I'm not going to go out of my way to Thackerville for any good reason.
All right. And then, since you've gone through so many eras over there, Jade, I know you keep in touch with her, obviously, but people like Jimmy Smith, Sean Wheelock, I'm sure you guys all formed a certain bond throughout the years because you see each other so often.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that bond and how strong it's been throughout the years?
Yeah, specifically with Jimmy. Jimmy is like a brother to me. He's acted as my bodyguard for at least the first, 7 years of Bellator. We didn't have an actual security guard with me or any of those things. So I still have a relationship with him. He's still a part of my life. He probably always will be. I hope he always will be. And as you know, like Jimmy left before I left. So having him leave was already a heartbreak. You know, little by little, I became, I think, one of like 3 or 4 individuals on the Bellator staff that were still there after all these years. So it was watching one person after another of your little family, you know, trickle away was tough. And yeah, being on the road with your traveling circus is you create bonds that are family members. And that's why I always specifically talk about it like family. And just to bring back what I was talking about earlier, you know, I'm all about mental wellness. And I told you that I kicked off my COVID inclusion, or what do you want to call it, recluse sector of my life by hiring a therapist. And I was lucky, I feel like, to have her when I was coming into my last few weeks of Bellator, because a lot was coming up for me of how I had even placed kind of familial personas onto these people in Bellator that I worked with, like literal family members. So I had to work through a lot of things with my therapist even. I know that sounds dramatic, but that's just the mode I like to use when doing my own introspective work. So yes, it was a definitely turbulent time getting through the end of my seeing these relationships, you know, seeing these people on a weekly basis. I'd say that, you know, Jade and Jimmy, those were my hardcore ride or dies. There's been a lot of other people that have come and gone that I've been really close with and stayed close with. I have a lot, actually. I feel like I was talking to someone about this earlier, but I have a lot of, I feel like friends from school, like growing up. I still have a lot of those friends, but as an adult, I think it's really difficult to make close, deep relationships that are really lasting. And you know, even being in a workplace where you sit at a desk all day, or you report to the same place where other people do too, you do get a deep bond. You do bond with people, and sometimes those relationships last, but I don't feel like there's anything like being on the road with people and creating that type of bond, because you're with them day to night, you're eating all your meals with them, you're having extremely deep conversation with these people, because that's just where it ends up after that much time together. So I have no reason to not keep those people in my life that I got to bond with that way.
All right, Mercedes, I want to take you back about a decade when you were in our studio at Mandalay Bay. You were just starting.
That picture looks a decade old. The pixelation on that thing.
Yeah, you were just starting, and I think at the time you may have still been a rehab girl at Hard Rock. I don't think a lot of people know that. You used to I remember you told us you liked the sand, like sand rails, quad runners, all that, Supercross. You grew up in that. But I want to ask, if you could talk to her, would you have done anything different? And it's kind of a 2-part question. What if a little girl were to just tell you, hey, is being a ring card girl, can I make that a career? Or do you think you and Ariane at the UFC and Brittany, who started in the WEC now with the UFC, you think maybe that's just something that you guys were there at the right time and you guys were able to do it, unlike some of the ones that have followed, that most of them haven't caught the type of traction that you all have?
I would probably say that if it is something that calls to you, do it, because I think it's important we focus on beginnings and not so much on how we might fail. If a young girl came to me and said, hey, I really want to be a ring girl because I saw, it worked out for you guys, I say, go for it. Just make sure whatever you do, stay super authentic to yourself. Don't get caught up in how did Mercedes do it? How did Ariane do it? Whatever. Get caught up in, what am I bringing to this that makes it exciting for me, first of all, because that's how you're going to create the energy space. It's going to make it exciting for other people. And then don't ever let any idea, whether it be to be a ring girl or anything else, fail before it ever begun, because you're going to learn from it no matter what. You get in there, you be, you do your best ring girling, whatever you want to call this. And if it doesn't work out because of whatever unforeseen circumstances, you for sure are going to take away from it, I did it. I tried this thing. And that's something to be proud of no matter how it ends up, every single time. Like I would never say don't do something if you feel called to it.
And would you say the same for your success as a social media influencer? I mean, let's face it, a lot of you all get paid just for a post. You're good advertising or marketing or however you want to look at it. If you're promoting a brand, would the same apply for that? And here's why I ask, because I think from the times that I've picked up a book or just watch I guess investigations, there's so much of a backlash towards social media and what it's doing to young kids. And I guess that's why I wanted to ask you, being that you've kind of grown up, like you literally probably started Bellator around the time somebody went, ta-da, Twitter, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I think you're right with that. Twitter seems like, I think, the first platform we were really going gung-ho with the company too. I would say that social media is what you specifically make it. There is all kinds of ways that we can make it a monster, and we can say that it has done all these negative things, but I will also tell you that it is where I've made some of the most incredible connections. It's where I've learned some of the most deep teachings, because I'm choosing who I follow. I'm choosing how I integrate the information that I pick up there, and I'm choosing how I interact with the platform generally. So I think it's more a question of empowerment. It's like, do you want the choice to be able to do any, absorb any content that's available? Or do you want that, censored, like some people would have it? And then when you talk about young kids or people who are being influenced in such a harmful way, I think it's about figuring out how to create a message that speaks to those people, where you can navigate that piece of like, how do you grab the attention of someone who is used to, I don't know what it is, this might sound really cliche, but is always video gaming and on social media. So they have the gratification that comes with, seeing a video game play all the way through. And they have the gratification of the instant gratification of a 3 to 15-second clip, and that's all their attention span is. How do you translate that to something that's more intimate and long form? Because that's really, I think, what we're asking at the end of the day is, how do we get young people to still be able to come and sit still and listen and learn and integrate and become these hopefully well-adjusted adults, instead of become hopeless, become suicidal, become anorexic, or whatever, whatever the things that might be what people point to social media and are saying are why it's so negative. So I don't know, just think about those things. So when you're putting out your own personal content, how do you create something that does what you want it to do in the world? How do you be the change? Because I think it starts, of course, with us. I think there is some truth to the matter that, yeah, I think kids especially are influenced easily, and they're living in I couldn't even imagine what it's like to be another, 10 or 20 years younger than I am right now, in being born into the Twitter era, where I didn't see the contrast from what it was like before social media to now. But I think it's also going to birth something new that I can't predict, because that's not my domestication. That's not where I was, that's not what I was born into. So I'm here for it either way. I'm going to do what I feel like, is my way of being of service in that regard, is putting out the content and information and my persona reflecting what I would like to see more of in the world, and hope that energy space is what creates more of it, essentially. And then keep working on me, man. That's all it's all about, I think, is work on your own shit, and it'll all be all right.
Yeah, so true. All right, just a couple more here. I think you finished up with Bellator 246, if my math is right. How many Bellators do you think you did? And if you want to include, I know Bellator started different series, like Europe, for example. So can you come close? Do you actually have a number of how many shows you think you did?
I didn't. I think I did over 200. I calculated this the other day. Definitely did over 200, but I would say that since my first show was, I believe it was the first show of the second season of Bellator. And at that time, I believe they were doing 13 show seasons. So I might have started on Bellator 14-ish or so. So if that gives you kind of a gist. Yeah.
Wow.
A lot. I've seen a lot of fights, man.
Yeah, a lot of traveling. You were always there. Every single time when the fighter was about to go in, you were always there. You were definitely a fixture. And you brought those days up of the weekly tournaments. Holy cow. I don't understand how you guys did that, because no sooner that you were unpacking, you do a load of laundry, and I got to imagine soon you're boarding another plane, or at least that's what it felt like.
Yeah, at the time I was actually Miss Supercross, and that's the moto world that I was living in at the time. And as Miss Supercross, I'd need to be at that show for a couple days, and then I'd be at Bellator a couple days by the time. So I would basically fly from wherever Bellator was to Supercross, work both shows simultaneously, because that's a 17-week in a row season for Supercross. And we were having 13-week seasons for Bellator. And so I'd literally just wouldn't be home either for months at a time, or if I did come home, it was just to pack, unpack, repack, and do laundry and hit the road. Don't miss those days. It was taxing on my body, to say the least, for sure.
Lastly, do you have any moment that you can share where behind the scenes, maybe the camera didn't catch it, where it was a heartfelt moment, a fighter, once they had already left the Bellator cage, that you saw maybe with their family, something melted your heart out? And is there a heartbreak moment that you saw where you're like, wow, everybody's crapping on this guy or gal, but little do they know, because of something that you may have seen that touched you, I guess?
I think that there's a lot of heartbreaking moments. Just seeing, once you get to know people, especially, and then watching them lose is always heartbreaking for everybody involved. But because I sat cage side, I sat almost always next to one corner or the other, one, either the blue guy or the red guy. I sat next to their family. So depending on where I was sitting around the cage, I was next to somebody in the cage's family. So watching either the highest highs, right, where everyone is just so elated and high-fiving everybody, you almost have to get out of the way quickly when someone wins, because they're jumping everywhere and you're going to get trampled on. Or the lowest lows, where it's just they're screaming, because sometimes they have their kids there. Their kids are yelling like about, their daddy is in the cage getting beat. And there's just a lot of, it's tough. I mean, being in this specific industry, watching people fight is not for everybody, but it's also just such an emotional roller coaster. And it takes so much wherewithal for not just the fighter, but also the whole family that has to put some sacrifice on the line for what's going into the cage. So definitely feel like I don't have a specific person that I would call out for what was, this moment that was heart-wrenching. I've maybe seen too many where it almost becomes like, oh, that happened, that sucks. I have my own maybe little process for going through that. But damn, it's a tough sport. People, I think it's actually similar to the way, this is a weird sideline, but it's kind of similar to the way that people view my career as like a sexy model, or using sex as the forefront, or even consumerizing sexuality. People want to say like, oh, that's ugly. We shouldn't do it. You're better than that. You're more than that, or shame me in some direction. And the reality is actually my sexuality and the portion of my being that is a sexual being is very comfortable and feels right to be able to express their sexuality. Whereas when you think about fighters, a lot of people goes, oh, I can't watch fighting. That's disturbing. How do you sit next to that? It's just wrong, and we have these opinions. And the reality is, no, we're also primal beings in the sense, not just of sexuality, but also in aggression. And fighting is a really beautiful example of how we, fighting in the sense of getting in a cage and honing our skills and having some rules to it and whatnot, and then competing against the best of the best is a pretty beautiful way of setting up, how we can see this primal part of us exploring itself in real time. So I don't know. I guess I'm gone off on a tangent, but
no worries. I want to thank you so much for hanging out with us today. And man, hopefully we can keep in touch with you. You know, like Ghost said, we both subscribe to Magic Hour, which drops on Monday, folks. You can grab it on all Apple Podcasts like we do, but I'm sure it's available on all the other podcast platforms as well. I have to confess, I think I'm in July somewhere with Peter Crone. I have some catching up to do, but either way, I do enjoy it because it makes I come away thinking about something that I probably wouldn't have thought about. So keep on rocking it there with Jade. And hey, you know, like I said, you still watch fights, so you never know. Maybe once every couple months or every certain amount of time when there's a big fight, we'll come in and get your opinion, especially on them dudes that you grew up with, you know, like the Michael Chandlers of the world, who's now moving on to the UFC. And,
yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think I texted you. I was like, wow, we lost Chandler and Mercedes in the same week. That one hurt, you know. But anyway, thanks again for the time. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys. You know, you have been a massive supporter really since the get-go, not just of me, but obviously the sport in general. And I think it's been really cool to watch your guys' progression because it's been serious, but also just to know that there are people out there that are so passionate about what they're doing and what they're bringing to this sport and to the entertainment industry generally, to the people watching. It's really changing the game. I think what you guys do is your passion shows through, and I love the way that you have pulled it off all these years. I'm so appreciative of how you guys have brought me into the loop too, and keep coming back for that. So thank you. I appreciate you guys.
All right, thank you. Appreciate the kind words. When COVID's done, it is going to be done. When COVID's done, if you find yourself in Vegas, look us up. We'd love to have you in studio to catch up and all that.
For sure. Thank you, guys.